Conversations with the operators, founders, and leaders doing the slow, hard, beautiful work of becoming who you always knew you could be. I'm George Leith. Let's get to work. Heather Monahan joining me once again on a podcast, but now on the Evolved Pros podcast. Heather, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, we met about 13 or 14 years ago. I was trying to figure it out, prepping for the episode. You haven't aged a day. I look way older. But one thing I wanted to talk about was just getting right into it. When you wrote your first book and you talked about the career transition that you were going through, nobody did that back then. And now that level of authenticity is something that people have realized is a superpower, where you just don't bullshit people, just tell them what's really going on. And you actually turned that life event, which was not overly positive, you turned it into, this business that you've built where you're helping individuals that are coping with that. And, now fast forward to today from when you and I first met, everybody's got fired at one point in time in their career. It's not an uncommon thing. I think that more and more people are dealing with it today than ever have been. You and I have been in leadership roles where sometimes we've had to deliver the bad news, not to mention have the bad news delivered to us. So that's my preamble to get you set up for, if you were to give any advice to someone that was facing the bad news, right? You've been working at a job for a while. You get called into the Zoom meeting. Usually, it's not even face to face anymore, or you get called in face to face. There might happen to be a manila envelope sitting on the table if you're working for a legacy organization. What? After all these years and you learning through the life event that happened, what advice would you give people that are facing that, maybe for the first time in their careers?
I mean, this is a jump off moment. I remember I Googled, has anyone successful ever been fired? And I found out Oprah Winfrey was fired, J.K. Rowling, Mark Cuban, Steve Jobs. Some of the most successful people in the world have been fired. So in good company, right? Reframe it as a positive. And when one door closes, a better one opens. And when you start stepping into life and challenges with that attitude, the speed at which you can emerge and step into something so much better is incredible. Now, I didn't know that at the time, right? I was definitely down and out the first 24 hours, not knowing. I had an 18-month non-compete, as you know, and had to leave the industry I was an expert in. So I was scared to reinvent myself. Now I've built a business all about reinventing yourself, right? So like anything, you're going to be a beginner at first and you're going to be nervous. But the key is to take action. The one step that I took that was really helpful was I had started building a personal brand a year before I was fired. In my opinion, I think that's why I was fired. And I posted when I got fired, hey, I've just been fired. If I've ever done anything to help you, I need to hear from you now. And that post went viral. To your point, people were not posting about getting fired back then. And still, I understand a lot of people don't want to share that personal news now. But for me, I thought, listen, if I stay in this bubble I'm in the media business. I can't stay in the media business. I need to get out of the media business, right? I had an 18-month non-compete. So I knew I needed to break through quickly and reach other industries, find out what opportunities were out there. And so when that post took off, it landed me on the Elvis Duran show, which ultimately is where he spoke life into me and said, Heather, you're writing a book. And I received his confidence in a moment where I didn't have any. And I said, you know what, you're right, I am writing a book, even though I had no idea how to write a book or what I'd write a book about. But that led me, to my first book, Confidence Creator, which trumped Donald Trump for #1 on the business biography list. And again, I didn't know any of these things were going to happen. It was more about having faith in that the right opportunities would be ahead. And the key was to keep taking action and move boldly to the next thing.
I've mentioned to you a few times that I had team members at that time. We were building the sales organization of Vendasta. I had female team members that had watched your content and read your book, and they said it was some of the most motivating content that they had witnessed. And actually, one of them, those team members, moved on to another role, got caught up in a round of layoffs and leaned a lot on those learnings that you've had. So how does that feel to have, and I know that that's not, you get comments all the time about that. How does it feel to know that something at the time that was super shitty, that you moved through, now you've been able to help and mentor a number of other individuals on arguably what might be one of the harder moments of our lives, and especially our professional lives?
It's incredible, right? But I also feel like that's when you know you're doing God's work. When did I like my old job? You knew me, my old job. Yeah, I liked being a chief revenue officer of a media company. I liked my team, but there were certain people in the C-suite that didn't like me that I didn't like, right? So I wasn't living my best life, even though on the outside looking in, it seemed that way. I wasn't living God's plan for my life. I wasn't thinking big enough, going big enough. And that moment forced me to, step into the bigger plan. And I would have never found it had I not been forced out. So I'm so grateful for it. I love the messages I get from people. I feel like I'm leading my life's purpose, why I'm supposed to be here.
So fast forward to today, you've published two books. You've been recognized as a top 50 keynote speaker. Of course, I stalk you on LinkedIn. No, the algorithm puts you into my profile on LinkedIn, and I see some of the stages that you've spoken on. Um, when we started, before we turned the record button on, we're both living our best lives at this point in time. I'm sure there are moments when you think back to that where you were dealing with the uncertainty, and now it's like, is it a bump in the road, or is it even less than a bump? Because I know that any of the times when I look back and I'm like, oh, that was a train wreck. But with time, those train wrecks aren't really train wrecks anymore. It's just a little bump in the road, and what we learned on the other side of that. Some of the biggest learnings come from those train wrecks.
Yeah, that's no, I still look back at that moment. It was really hard. I had built a life that I thought, and this was a trick, I thought was full of certainty. I knew the next quarterly meeting, I knew the next protocol, I knew the next corporate America. It's all I had ever done my entire career. And I thought it was so clear what that next step was. And, I was fooling myself whenever you work for somebody else, the industry could change. There can be layoffs, technology can change, and that can upset everything. Your CEO could leave, or someone could take over. Anything can happen. And I was living under this false sense of security, which did not exist. The only security you're ever really going to have is within you. And I was outsourcing my confidence, outsourcing security to people around me, and that was taken from me. So that moment to understand, wait a minute, I've really never had certainty. I'm stepping into the biggest, what it seemed like uncertainty ever. But as I moved through certainty and uncertainty again through my life over the last 7 years, I've realized that when everything's uncertain, anything's possible, right? And some of those big moments, yeah, they were hard. It was not like a speed bump. I mean, that was like a train wreck. And it felt like one at the time, but it ended up being this incredible blessing. The thing is, you have to have that faith in those moments to say, I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I just know it's going to be something that's meant for me, something bigger and better. This door is closing because something better is opening. And the sooner I can start walking into it and letting go of what that past was, the more I can start receiving what's ahead of me. And I understand for anyone going through a big transition right now. My son just graduated high school. He's moving to college. This is another pivotal moment in life where suddenly your purpose and calling of what you've been doing for so much of your life is changing. And, now it's version 2.0, 3.0 of Heather, right? What does that new future look like? There's fear and there's uncertainty. And instead of seeing it as a negative, starting to see it as a positive, that, oh my gosh, this is exciting. This is something I could really, there's a fine line between fear and excitement, right? It's which side you choose to lean on. And I choose to lean towards excitement and getting really excited about what's ahead.
When I remember when I first met you, really well put together. You had a plan. We were able to start doing some business together, but I noticed you had a plan. Do you find sometimes when there's life uncertainty, like career changes to people that always have a plan, that's probably very earth shattering? Whereas, I fly this by the seat of my pants. I don't even really know what's going to happen tomorrow. No, I've gotten more buttoned up as time has went on, because it's actually a much better life to live. But I find personality probably plays a lot into how people can roll with the punches when they eventually come our way.
Yeah, I had, a lot of this goes back to psychology. I studied psychology in school, and I had a childhood where I didn't feel safe. So one of the things that happens, you try to control everything else around you to create safety, to create certainty. And again, none of it's real, right? So I had, to your point, I was very buttoned up. I always had the next, here's where we're going. Here's what this looks like. Here's the roadmap. Here's the 2 year, 5 year, 10 year plan. And I had mapped this whole thing out that wasn't real. And it wasn't my company, right? And so when that day came that I was fired, it was all about reinventing myself as someone who can live without the plan. Because here's the truth, when you start doing anything new, when you're a beginner, everyone's a beginner at some point, you have to figure stuff out. You're going to stumble, you're going to fall, you're going to have fails. It's not going to go, if you've never done it before, how do you know how it's going to go? You don't know, right? And that's kind of the beauty of it. Sarah Blakely from Spanx talks a lot about her fails, and what she didn't know is what made her so big, special, and unique in her space, because she saw everything differently. She saw things that other people didn't see. It's about stepping into these new roles, new opportunities, and saying, I don't have the plan. And that's what's so exciting. That's how I'm going to be able to reimagine things that nobody else has ever imagined. I'm coming at this from my perspective, my vantage point, and excited to step into this unknown. And yes, there's been so many fails along the way over the last 7 years. But now I'm getting to a place where it took a while to let go of that old persona and say, you know what, that served me well for a time, but this new persona gets excited dealing with uncertainty, gets excited about being a beginner in AI, and embraces it.
You said something interesting that in your back to your childhood, and I remember a boss of mine, and then now we're friends, and he said something to me at one point in time. He said, "Everybody's got a gig, and you need to understand." And that gig was set when we were younger, right? Like he was super tall and he was really skinny, so he was the tall, skinny kid, but not in a good way skinny, right? Like he probably got bugged because he was a beanpole at school. And I grew up as the fat kid at school, and so we've all kind of got our things. And how do we deprogram that stuff? Like one of mine is, my father is a farmer, and then he had a trucking company, so he's had two jobs his entire career. I've had two jobs in the last 3 years. So, we don't quite line up on that, but I was kind of raised in the find a career and stick with it. And I just don't know if that works out for you in 2026.
Yeah, my analogy or my version of that, which I appreciate you bringing up, is growing up, I was always called the social one. My sister was called the smart one. And what had happened was, I didn't realize it, and probably for people listening right now, you don't realize it either. And I challenge you tonight to do something with this knowledge, is that you might be holding onto a label that was never real, was never yours to hold to begin with, that's limiting you or keeping you from doing things that you think you can't do. And that was definitely for me. And I'm speaking through all this through the lens of, I wasn't the smart one. I had heard that growing up. It stuck with me. So we would be in meetings, and I'd hear someone was from Harvard and they were going to be in the meeting. I would do everything I could to dip out. I didn't want to sit in that meeting because I didn't feel as smart as that person, or these stories that I was telling myself that were never mine to tell. And my big breakthrough moment, when I decided I am dropping those labels, they don't serve me, and instead of being Heather's the social one and her sister's a smart one, I'm going to put and in between. Heather's a smart one and she's the social one. And the moment I decided to do that was the moment I accepted the challenge to write my first book, because I struggled at first with this imposter syndrome idea that I'm not smart enough to write a book. And thankfully, I decided to say, no, it's not or. I don't have to be smart or social. I can be both. And when I dropped those old labels and stepped into this new version of myself, I wrote, a bestseller. And so figure out, what are those labels that you've been holding on to since you were a child, and choose to connect it with an and, or choose to drop it all together. But if it's not serving you, get rid of it now.
So the goal of this podcast, and you and I met when I had the Conquer Local podcast, which was part of the brand of the other company. So I miss talking to folks like you and learning in the episodes. This one's all about evolution, because what I've realized after 40 some odd years of trying to figure this whole thing out, which I still don't think I got it too much figured out, but I have figured one thing out, and that is that I'm pretty good at reinventing myself. And being able to reinvent yourself is a superpower. As we move through what will be the next 10 years, the change is going to be unbelievable. If you just think about the change in even the last 6 months, and we've been dealing with a lot of change since you and I met. So you wrote a second book called Overcoming Your Villains, and there's an acronym in there called BACK that you put together. And I think that that lesson is very timely right now, as because sometimes those villains are the demons that are telling us the stories and holding us back.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, right? The transition we're going through right now with AI is massive, bigger than what anyone realizes. Last week, Stanford came out with a research paper, and it showed that 80% of people in our country are either not using AI or using it incorrectly. They're using it like Google. And that horrifies me because as you and I both have been in digital media and we went through this, whole transition back in early 2000, we've seen this movie before. This one's going to be even bigger. But when you start to understand, okay, I've got to embrace change, I've got to step into change, and I want to lead with this because it can be a game changer for my business, for my company, for myself and as a leader. And so, really embracing that right now is critical. You mentioned overcome your villains and my 3-part framework, which is beliefs, action, and knowledge, and is helpful around situations like this where people are saying, how I was saying it, a year ago, I got called to speak at an AI conference. And I thought, I feel like an imposter again. And I went to ChatGPT and I said, why am I being asked to speak at an AI conference? I feel like such a fraud. And it was so interesting. ChatGPT told me, Heather, you led a media company through the early 2000s, through digital media transformations, and started showcasing all the change that you and I both had led teams through. That uniquely qualifies you to lead through this type of change. Again, we're just not seeing it through that lens. So it was helpful for me to go to ChatGPT, and I encourage everyone to do that because your biggest champion will be ChatGPT. So that was helpful to start embracing that idea. And once I did that, I was challenging my beliefs, right? So that's step one in the acronym BACK is challenge your beliefs if they're limiting you, holding you back. Make sure you're tapping the right people around you. Ask people for direction if they've been to the places you want to go. Not, you're not asking the haters or the toxic boss that fired you what their opinion is and if you should speak at an AI conference. But be smart about who you're tapping to help you formulate those new beliefs. Drop the beliefs that aren't working for you any longer. And then this is a key step: is take action. Right? So many people. I immersed myself in AI. I just got back from a 5-day intensive with Mindstone in San Francisco. And I love being the person in the room that doesn't have the most expertise. I don't want to be the smartest person in any room, right? You're in the wrong room if you are. And I get excited about being over my skis with knowledge. And when you take those steps and you take those action steps to say, okay, I'm going to step into this thing. I have no idea. I'm just going to start figuring it out. You truly will, and you'll do it at a pace and a speed other people just can't even keep up with. And so it's beliefs, change your beliefs, acknowledge your beliefs, hold the good ones, get rid of the ones that aren't serving you, take big action steps, and then knowledge. So often people will say, social media is terrible. And I'll say, let me see your Instagram. I want to see your feed. And their feed will be about war, and their feed's about layoffs. And when you look at my feed is about, here's the things I do when my son's not around. Prayer from, like all these positive messages. So the world and the back framework is all about this. The knowledge you surround yourself with day in and day out shapes how you think, the actions you take, and what you believe. You've got to curate it the same way the algorithm's curating it. If you like on these posts about fighting and negativity, it's going to start consuming your world. You're shaping and you're curating your own world with the knowledge you access, what you're watching on television, the people that you're speaking to, the books that you're reading, and the algorithms that you're engaging with. Choose wisely.
Well, and I find that because we all have a way that we're going, and I'm not going to get into left, right, center. I'm just saying we all have a path that we're on. But I always like to pull a few of those people in on the algorithm that I may not necessarily agree with on a day-to-day basis, because I don't want to be over here with my, the head in the sand analogy can be just you're only consuming certain pieces of content. You might be missing out. I'll give you an example. You brought up ChatGPT. I still actually pay a very small subscription on that, but I'm only using the API because I moved to Claude. recently. So now my feed is just filled with Claude stuff. But then, I use a little bit of Grok, so I get some Grok stuff. So I didn't know that we were going to talk a lot about AI, but I kind of had a feeling when I looked at you've been leaning into it. I knew you would be. Um, where do you feel you're at in your journey? Back to that point of most people just ask it a question and get an answer and are not using it as aggressively as they could. What cool stuff are you working on right now?
Oh my gosh, it's changing so fast that it's. I'm sure by the time this comes out, we'll be doing something totally different. But right now, it's for me really learning how to automate, how to leverage the skills and build the agents so that you are replicating yourself, creating free time. And I'll share with everyone a couple of things that I learned at this Mindstone event in San Francisco, which was incredible. You can move 30% faster if you use text instead of typing, right? So I downloaded the Monologue app. And so now I speak to my AI instead of writing, which is so helpful. It's more productive and you're moving 30% or 3 times faster, right? So now you're more efficient and effective just to begin with. So that's number one. Number two, Claude Cowork is exactly what I lean into and leverage. I use ChatGPT. I see ChatGPT like a woman. She's a great writer. She's creative. And so she helps with my brand deck and my visuals, and she helps with my email blast that I'm writing. I like the tone that she has. Claude Cowork is like a man. He's systems. He's moving fast. Whatever you need to build, it's happening quickly with Fable 5. And, things are moving really quickly and systems are being created. And so I'm working with Claude Cowork on, automating so many different things from the best hooks that are trending, to give me an edge on social media so I can get more eyeballs on my products and services. I use, I found the Council LLM prompt from GitHub. And so I created that as a skill. So now I have my own board of directors that challenge me whenever I run council. And, this is public information. Anyone can get this and use this on your Claude Cowork as well. But now you have your own personal board of directors. So anytime you have a new idea or something you want to test first, I go, Claude, run council and tell me, what am I seeing? What am I not seeing? What am I missing? Help me to understand. I've learned that you can push back on AI tremendously and it will keep getting better and challenging the thought process to ensure that it isn't lying, that it's not inaccurate, to have the AI interview you so it's all more human. A lot of people will say, oh, AI is making a human world non-exist anymore. That's not true. It's like, if I were to drive a Ferrari, I don't know what I'm doing, but if a race car driver is going to drive a Ferrari, they're going to get a much different output, right? It's all about the person driving the AI. And yes, there's AI slop out there, but that's because people are using it like Google. If you really want to get an unbelievable end product, I built an app last weekend when I was there. I built a digital avatar version of myself. I'm not a coder. AI makes it so easy to do these things. It's allowing us to be more human than ever because it's taking human, regular people and connecting us to the abilities that it used to be just coders had, right? So I can have an idea, and the more great ideas and innovation I come up with, I have a partner now in my computer that can actually build it and do it within moments, where before I didn't have the bandwidth, the talent, or the engineers to create any of this.
Well, and to your point, you've got to go find somebody to do the work, and now you can use the tool to do the work. Are you finding that now this probably isn't a fair question because you were very systems focused to begin with. That's the way that you were built as an individual. What I'm finding, because more pioneer driver type personality, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. It's going to be fine. I'm finding I'm more systems built because in order to get a good outcome out of AI, you have to have a system or it comes apart at the seams. Are you finding that as well, that everything's a little bit more buttoned up outside of working with AI because of what AI is forcing you to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's very helpful because creating, and this is, we're still in this beginning, murky part where it hasn't formulated yet. I think that obviously there'll be a lot of acquisitions of companies. Some tools will emerge. You're already seeing that some of these businesses are some of these AI companies are going out of business because these other larger companies are moving so much faster and, replacing one another. But in the end, the ultimate goal is to have such a system in place that it's whatever your system is, whatever tool it is that you use, is able to create these agents, able to go out and do these things all on automation, all set up recurringly so that you don't have to be managing all of it. And it's just feeding you that output and final product decision, email, whatever it is that you're asking for. But yeah, it's definitely allowing us to have systems at a level that I could never have imagined.
Do you sometimes feel like you're cheating when you're using it?
No, gosh, no. I would be cheating the world if I wasn't using it, right? So we can move so much faster, be more efficient, be better, create more. That's so important. In order to make the world a better place, good people need to use AI so they can move faster.
I had somebody say that to me the other day, and I asked the question as to why they felt that way, and they're like, "It shouldn't be this easy to do what I just did." And basically where they were coming from is the processes that they were going through to get the outcome that you can now just give an agent felt like they were cheating.
That's funny. It's just embracing new technology, and you know this. We've seen this before. It's going the iterations that we're going to see, the changes that we're going to see. It's going to be incredible. I can't wait to see what this all shakes out to be. But I'll tell you, just even being in San Francisco, part of and this goes back to the back framework, the environments that you're in really impact the way you see things. It was amazing to me in San Fran. There was robots in the airport. There was robots making coffee in the airport. We don't have that in Miami. Now we have Waymo everywhere in Miami. We have, autonomous Uber Eats delivery here in Miami. So in a lot of parts of the country don't have those things, but being in San Fran, it was a completely next level. And to see what was normal, every billboard out there is AI. It's unbelievable to see the environment that you put yourself in really can open your mind to what's possible.
I always get this pushback, and I'm wondering how you deal with it because I'm sure you get it as well. But it's not authentic. The singing cow that's doing the bullshot commercial that's on TV right now, it's pretty cool. But of course it's AI. What's your rebuttal to that? It's not as authentic.
I mean, I don't agree with that, right? I still am creating content that I'm pushing back on AI. I'm having AI interview me. It's very human driven. I'll also go back and forth for idea starters with AI, but I'm not copy pasting and moving forward. That's my own version of keeping things more human, using stories that only I know, using my experience that is only unique to me as a human. AI can't create that content without me, the humans driving it. So it's all about how you're driving it. I see it as a tool. I don't see it as cheating being human or, again, having, I guess it's an unfair advantage for people who are willing to combine their humanity with the tool.
I find because I'm deep into the rabbit hole and I'm using it like 6, 7 hours a day. So I'm way over here. I find when I show my colleagues things that I'm working on that you get a bit of the deer in the headlights look that you and I were getting years ago when we were talking to people. You got to sell more than a 30-second radio commercial, right? Or it's not going to work out for you. I get a lot of that. How are you dealing with that when you get that? You're very passionate about it. You're using it at an expert level, and you get the other individual that's afraid. Like, what are some things that we can say to them to help them get there? Because I feel that this is something that if you don't learn this, it's not going to be good for you in 5 to 10 years.
Listen, I was a lifeguard, and this is the best analogy I can give you. You can throw somebody, a buoy to hang on to, but it's up to them to reach and actually hang on, right? You can't force your save on somebody. So that, first of all, I have a couple of friends who said, I'm just going to ignore this thing. I think it's terrible for my kid, and they're not going to be able to. I just want to tune it out. Well, you know what? Rock on. Let me know how that works out for you. I can tell you that I'm going to predict it's not going to be positive, right? But you can't force someone to want to change. You can't force someone to embrace change. That much is something I've learned in life, right? Gosh knows I've tried. It's definitely better to surround yourself with people who are willing to admit, I'm a beginner with this stuff. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I want to learn, and I know I'm going to make mistakes, but I'd love it if you could teach me what you know, or you could point me to who taught you. And a lot of what I've done, which I'm sure you have too, George, at night I just sit on my computer and I self-teach, right? I just I read articles, I immerse myself in just doing the thing. It's the same way I became a public speaker, right? You put the reps in, you get up and give the speeches, and then suddenly years later, people are saying you're so great. Well, if you'd seen all the reps I put in, I don't think it's any different here with technology. I sit up at night every night and I'm down the rabbit hole on a new Claude prompt, a new GitHub download, creating a new agent. And I'm testing and trying, and some of it works out great and some of it isn't so great. But I know that if I keep immersing myself, I keep putting the reps in, it'll all come together eventually.
So there's a lot of places that we could go with this interview, but I wanted to talk about public speaking because I remember when we were building the tech company that I was at, Vendasta, when you and I met, one of the things that was one of the rituals that we had was you had to sing a song when you were introduced to the company at company all hands every Friday. And the culture of the organization tried to rip that out for 10 years. And our CEO was adamant, no, we're going to do this. And part of it was to take people that were more introverted and get them used to standing in front of a group of people and presenting, which, as you know, is a superpower if you're able to do that quite well. And you're one of the better speakers that I've ever witnessed. What is some advice that you would have to people that are scared shitless to get up there and to exercise that? Because I don't think you move up in organizations and do things in the corporate world and not have some level of presentation that you're going to have to deliver. Even what we're doing right now, it's more buttoned up. We got backgrounds and we're in the middle of the screen, and I'm looking to see how the hell do you not age because I got wrinkles all over the place. Like we're paying more attention to those things because this is such an important part of our lives now, doing this kind of a presentation thing. So what are some advice that you could give? Because I'm pretty sure you weren't born a great speaker. I think you became one over time.
Yeah, again, it's putting the reps in, doing the work. I was a sales manager, as you know, and sales leader since I was 22 years old. So those are microcosms of getting up and giving a speech every single day when you stand in front of your sales team. Yes, it started out with 10 salespeople standing in front of me. And so I wasn't that nervous back then, but those teams grew over the years. But again, when you're doing the talk, these micro talks that I was doing every single day, suddenly it's not as hard to get up and do a talk in front of more people, right? So any way that you can put the reps in. I remember when I was getting ready for my TEDx, and this is years after I'd been speaking my entire career, I was asking anyone and everyone I knew, can I come in and speak for your committee for free? Can I come speak your school for free? Because I wanted more reps in of giving my TEDx before I got on that stage. So any way you can give yourself, you're at a dinner, on a Friday night, stand up and do a toast. That's the same thing. Do it amongst your friends so you start easing yourself into it. And for people who really struggle with fear, because it is one of the biggest fears some people have, public speaking, go see a hypnotist. I have worked with a hypnotist before. It helps. If you've got an unlock that you can't get beyond and that's holding you back from your potential within you, find a way to break through it. The best way I know how is to actually do the thing. But that starts with, the beliefs that you hold. I visualize myself, getting standing ovations. I test and try different things. I surround myself with speakers who are ahead of me. So I look up to them to say, if they're out there doing this in front of these massive audiences, I can too. And I try to make it about the one person that you can impact and affect that is worth it. For me, going to Saudi Arabia the first time, I was very scared. It was an audience of 200,000 people. I had never been to the Middle East. So to say I was afraid is an understatement. I was petrified. And a lot of people told me I shouldn't be going. So I had a tremendous narrative that was negative in my head. And I decided to pump the brakes and say, I need to stop making this about me. I need to make it about that one woman that's going to be in that audience that has never seen a female on a stage. And if I can impact that one woman, if I can give her one gold nugget that could help change her life, this whole thing was worth it. And then suddenly the fear isn't so big because you're making it about who you can help.
Well, and if you're going to deliver something that works for that individual, you got to bring your best. And I'm putting two and two together here is that's how you get over those butterflies. I think it's important for people to understand this. I have not talked to too many amazing presenters that still don't get nervous. It just is a thing. I think there are some people out there that think, well, that person, they've been presenting so long, they never get nervous. And you brought up another point that was really interesting. It's usually in front of your peers that is the hardest group to present to for some reason.
Yeah, because people get in their heads and they start comparing themselves to one another. And that comparison game is an epic fail, right? Stay focused on you. The view will always be better. So the more we can stop making it about ourselves, make it about the others, the more we can step through that fear. And like you said, listen, we all get nervous because we care. And I don't think that's a negative. I heard Beyonce has this alter ego, Sasha Fierce, that she channels in order to get up on those stages. Well, when I hear that Beyonce gets nervous and has to channel another alter ego, I don't feel so bad that I get nervous. And I'll, channel my badass Heather Monahan version, or whoever you have to channel to step into it and do it. But if she has to do it, then it's okay that I feel a little nervous. And it's okay if you're nervous too. We actually care. We want to do a good job. And sometimes I've been on stages where I've said, and I feel nervous AF right now. Has anyone ever stood on a stage and felt nervous? And that makes the audience connect with you because they can relate to you. So, put those moments to work for you. I tripped coming out on a stage for the Drift company in Boston. And Sarah Blakely was walking out on the stage with me, and I caught my heel and I almost face planted. So I just made it a joke. I said, "Hometown girl just about went down. Does anyone feel for me right now?" And, they started laughing and clapping. And I don't know, take the quirkiness, take the nervousness, and put it to work with you and connect more to the audience through that lens. Be that real version of you, and boom, they'll be cheering for you.
So some amazing lessons in there. Practice, like until you can't practice anymore. Um, have your why. Again, that why could, help you when you're really nervous. The other thing, just breathe. I had a colleague of mine, I remember the first time she presented, I actually thought she was going to expire on stage. And I've said to people, I've never met anybody that died on stage, like to get them over it. And so then we met afterwards and I said, "So how was that?" And she said, "I never ever want to do that again." And I said, "No, you're going to keep doing it and you're going to get really good at it." And when I finally departed that role, that individual came up to me afterwards and said, "I really appreciate you pushing me through that time because now she's an amazing presenter." But I remember the one thing I was like, "You were super nervous. What do you think was going on there?" And she said, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "What was going on there is you were in flight mode. And what happens when we're in flight mode is we stop breathing and just taking a couple of deep breaths and getting that oxygen back into your brain. And now you don't think that you're going to die." And anyways, I really appreciate you giving some of that advice and being so authentic about it, which I knew you would be, because I think there are people that watch your videos of you presenting thinking that you just woke up like that and that shit just happens. But I know there's an enormous amount of preparation that goes into those.
Yeah, and I always try to challenge myself to innovate and do things differently. And one of the reasons I do that is because I'm around other speakers that are constantly. Jesse Itzler's been coming out onto these massive stages with a DJ with him in sync with. It's incredible what they've done. That's got to be scary for him. He's doing a completely new concept that nobody else had done. And I was speaking actually on a stage with him, the Aspire stage in Dallas a few months back. And the night before our event, we ran into each other in the lobby. I had giant heels on. My heel got stuck yet again on a rug, and I face planted. But I really went down this time. And he's a friend, and so he was laughing at me. And it was funny, but I couldn't get it out of my head. When I went back to my hotel room, I thought, "Oh my gosh, what if I did that on stage? And there's thousands of people here. That'd be really bad." I couldn't get it out of my head. And I've been speaking for years. And I was about to take the stage, and all of a sudden in my mind, I said, "Screw it, I'm taking my shoes off." And I went out on stage, and people, are cheering for you. And I said, "Hang on, can I ask everybody a big favor? Does anyone mind if I take my heels off? I don't want to face plant right now." And I got a standing ovation, George. And it was such an interesting thing, which is I shared a real fear that I was having with the audience. I kicked my shoes off, which was very unexpected. It's actually called a pattern interrupt. When you do something like Jesse bringing the DJ out, that's a pattern interrupt. It's not, no one could have seen that coming. It was almost shocking, right? You get people's attention. And so I learned every single time now that I walk out on stage, I kick my shoes off and I get a standing ovation. And so now I use it to leverage my talks, to get a better response. So sometimes those moments that you think, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get beyond this," maybe that ends up being your breakthrough moment to make you different than everybody else.
I met a gentleman here a few years back, and one of his gigs was he bought the pre. I didn't even know this was a thing. He bought the pre-show for Tony Robbins in Asia. So when Tony Robbins would go do live stuff in Asia, he sells those speaking spots at the beginning. And I was like, okay, so what's that like to present with arguably one of the better presenters on the planet, and has been doing it a long time, built a hell of a business out of it. And he's like, he's just like the rest of us. He's got the trampoline in the back, and he's bouncing on the trampoline and getting all fired up with that crazy ass voice of his. And he has a bit of a ritual. So your ritual now has this thing where you kick the shoes off, but what else do you do to get ready for an event? Because you're doing how many speaking events a year now in the career that you've built for yourself from the ground up since the first book?
No, multiple every single month. And it's interesting I spoke for Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi for a couple of years, and I have done his events with him, his virtual events, and, millions of people there. And one of the things that was so eye-opening for me, the amount of work that those guys put together, no one could imagine, because a lot of people say Tony Robbins is just the best speaker and he just shows up. No, those guys, the amount of money and time, so much more than me, that it encouraged me and motivated me to work harder at prepping, right? It's like a machine, the way they have it to the second, and no one goes over, and everyone's like lock and step, and they run through so many times. So when the best of the best are running their speaking business like that, it challenges you to say, okay, I can do better. There's more that I can do. So, for me, a lot is around visualization. A lot is around practicing. A lot is finding whatever venue you're going to speak at. So for anyone listening, if you have to give a presentation at work, go to that boardroom ahead of time. Put yourself in that room. The more familiar and comfortable you can get with that stage, with that table, with that whatever, the more at ease you'll feel, because you can see yourself there, right? And the more you start visualizing and practicing, just like an Olympic athlete would, you see yourself there, you see it going well, you can, hear people applauding, whatever it is, that outcome that you want, you start to create that, oh yeah, I can feel this coming. You start practicing. My son gave a TEDx a few months ago, and the night before he said, I just don't have this thing, nailed down. I don't know what I'm going to do. He hadn't put the work in yet. And so the first thing I had him do is write the whole thing out, because if you write something out, you have much better chance of, remembering it. So I had him do that. Then one of the tricks that I use that works really well is to not get hung up on every word has to be perfect, but instead, what is the beginning and the intro? What is the thing I'm teaching? And then what is my close? And if you can just really, from a step back from it, remember it from that big picture standpoint, then all you have to worry about is the hook. How do I transition from one to the next? And so we worked with him. I created a color for each one of the pieces, an emotion with each one of the pieces, and one little micro story. So he really only had to remember 5 things, and he could see the color, he could feel the emotion, and then you marry a movement with it. And so when you do that, it's called an anchor. You anchor that emotion, that story, that concept with a movement. And when you start bringing all those things together, it's almost impossible to fail or to forget. And so he ended up nailing it, and I was so proud of him.
Wouldn't that be an amazing third book where you could just put together how to deliver the killer TED talk? Because that was a micro lesson on how to put together complex concepts and tie them all together. So thank you for that. I wasn't expecting that today. Is there a third book coming, or are you just continuing to fly around the world and give these amazing keynote speeches? What's on the horizon for you? What do we see Heather Monahan doing in the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's exciting. Because of my personal brand, I highly encourage everybody to have a personal brand. It's definitely the most human thing you can do, because it's allowing you to get to other people to know, like, and trust you at scale, right? So definitely harness your personal brand. But because my personal brand reaches a lot of people now, I have partners coming to me with new products that they want me, to partner on. I have another partner that came to me wanting me to do a series around my first book, Confidence Creator, and Confidence Creator for teens, and Confidence Creator for kids. And so we're working on that now. I'm working on so many different projects because my personal brand jumps out ahead of me and gets to know people, and then I am able to receive opportunities as a result. So it's been It's been an interesting year to kind of start processing. Okay, what are the projects I really want to work on? Where do I see business going? As you and I both mentioned, spending time with AI, doing the work, building that piece of my business out is really important. And how can I innovate and bring more solutions forward for my community? But yeah, there will be a new book, and it will be soon.
Well, I really appreciate you giving me some of your valuable time. I always learn a lot when we get a chance to talk, and I'm sure that the audience will appreciate some of the lessons that you brought forward today. So thanks for joining us on the Evolved Pros podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, George. It was great to see you.
That's the conversation for this week. If it moves something, share it with someone who needs it. I'm George Leith. I'll see you when I see you.